Hello there! It's time for another Godzilla review, and this time we're talking about 1962's King Kong vs. Godzilla, Japanese title, Kingu Kongu Taigojira. This one was new to me, and I was looking forward to checking it out for the first time. Unfortunately, the only version my library had was the dubbed American edit, and if you've ever scanned the reviews of these movies on the Internet Movie Database, you know the American versions are considered vastly inferior. But I've always known sooner or later there was going to be one that I couldn't get the Japanese edition for, and it turned out to be this one, for better or for worse. Probably worse. First, a little interesting background on this movie. In 1960, Willis O'Brien, the genius behind the original 1933 King Kong's groundbreaking stop-motion animation effects, dreamed up a sequel titled King Kong Meets Frankenstein. He took this idea to producer John Beck at RKO. Beck took the idea, developed a screenplay, and shopped around for an overseas buyer behind O'Brien's back. O'Brien took Beck to court, arguing that he owned the rights to Kong, not Beck, but he lost. Incidentally, Kong's producer and director, Marion C. Cooper, also attempted to sue Beck over Kong's rights. With the law now proven to be on his side, Beck went on his merry way and sold the screenplay to Toho, where Frankenstein, or Frankenstein's monster, was swapped out for Godzilla. However, Beck retained the rights to produce his own version of the finished product, which premiered for American audiences in 1963. Interestingly, the movie's title is the same in both languages, with Kong getting top billing over Godzilla, even in Godzilla's home country, due to Kong's popularity in Japan. Kong had also been a hit in the 1930s when the original Universal film came out. In fact, Japan produced two of its own short King Kong-inspired movies in 1933 and 1938. Unfortunately, these films were both destroyed in the war and are considered lost. Got all that? Great, now let's talk about the movie. This is the third Godzilla film in the franchise, and the first of two Kong films Toho made. The story is tasked with introducing Kong and resurrecting Godzilla from the dead. To do so, the narrative bounces from one monster to the other until they cross paths and have their first rumble. To tie everything together, the story focuses mainly on a Japanese pharmaceutical company in the process of extracting juice from giant red berries to make a narcotic. That's their chief product, but their chief interest is in getting high TV ratings. As a massive publicity stunt, the head of the company sends two men to the exotic island these berries came from in order to capture the giant god that the natives say lives there. I'll give you a hint, it's King Kong. The pharmaceutical reps succeed, sort of, in finding and capturing the giant ape, but not for long. Meanwhile, cut to a submarine that's encountering unusually warm water and chunks of icebergs. Surprise! They've found Godzilla, and he's breaking out of his icy tomb. Soon he and Kong run into each other, but instead of teaming up and going on a friendly rampage together, they take an instant dislike to each other, have a tussle, and then go on separate rampages. With two national disasters on their hands, the military and the pharmaceutical company, which claims ownership of Kong, come up with a win-win situation. Pit the two monsters against each other. In other words, let them fight, in a publicized wrestling match for the ages. Hopefully they'll wipe each other out, and the TV ratings will be astronomical. You might have noticed that in that summary there's a big focus on television ratings, and that's because director Ishiro Honda wanted to make a movie parodying the high-stakes competition for TV ratings that was going on at the time in Japan. Now, to me, the notion that a pharmaceutical company would go to such lengths to get publicity seems more than a little absurd, but it's a parody, so that's kind of the point. Another thing to take into account is special effects director Eiji Tsuburaya's intention to drive the Godzilla films into the children's market by making the material lighter and the monsters more comical, something which, by the way, Ishiro Honda was not in favor of. As a result, there's a lot of silliness in this movie, much of it stemming from the antics of the guys at the pharmaceutical company. These three are so ridiculous. Are they as over the top in the Japanese version? Now, as for my personal thoughts, this movie can get pretty goofy. Sometimes the comedy works, sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes I laughed at things that I don't think were intended to be funny. There are good parts, and then there are parts that dance along the border between bad and so bad it's good territory. So bad it's good is such a subjective term that I hesitate to use it, but what else do you call it when there's a scene that makes you groan and roll your eyes, yet you enjoy it for that very reason?
Godzilla!
The world is stunned to discover that prehistoric creatures exist in the 20th century.
That scene, which I admit was a favorite of mine in the so bad it's good category, or at least part of it, is specific to the American version, and honestly, a lot of the things that I thought were off seem to be exclusive to that edit, in which the script was rewritten and certain scenes were removed, rearranged, or recut, which certainly had an effect on the story and the characters. Then they added these cutaway scenes of Michael Keith as a UN reporter who sits in a newsroom, communicating with other international reporters via satellite, and consulting with a professor from the Museum of Natural History who's on hand to explain things like Godzilla's origin, the monster's motivations, and how much smaller Godzilla's brain is than Kong's. I have no idea how he knows any of these things. Supposedly, these lackluster wooden scenes were intended to Americanize the movie, but I'm an American, and I think they're pretty awful. They also added stock footage to enhance the special effects and maybe fill the deficit left by everything they cut. I'm pretty sure they used the same image of the city with the same music cue over it at least 3 times. And speaking of the music, I was bummed to find out that Akira Ifukube's original score was tossed out and replaced with music on file from nearly a dozen previous Universal films. That's so disappointing, and it's really weird when I recognize some of the music they chose, especially the parts they took from The Creature from the Black Lagoon. I'd know those blasting trumpets anywhere. Now, since I watched this, I have discovered that there are currently a couple versions of the original Japanese film on YouTube. One is okay quality, but has Portuguese subtitles, and the other has English subtitles, but has a white haze over it to avoid copyright violation. So now, I feel like I've been really critical about this movie, so let me backtrack. I did enjoy several things, including the nods to the original King Kong. They still used suitmation for distance shots, but in close-up they animated his face with stop motion, just like the original. They also imitated the scene where Kong picks up a train and peers inside, and he finds a girl and is fascinated with her and carries her to the top of a building where he defiantly looks down on his pursuers. I thought some of the changes to Godzilla's suit were good. They removed his ears and gave him a heftier shape, so he's got even more weight to throw around. Well, I'm not crazy about Kong's facial design, not sure if it's the eyebrows or the dead eyes, but he's just not as compelling. I do think they did a pretty good job making him a suitable opponent for Godzilla. He's quite cunning, coming up with offensive strategies, and he learns from his mistakes. In what I assume is a crossover feature from Willis O'Brien's original idea, Kong gets extra power and strength from lightning. This is probably why chewing on high-tension wires has no effect on him, an idea that makes me cringe, and it gives him a better chance against Godzilla and his atomic breath, which is another thing that's awesome, by the way, seeing Godzilla's bright blue atomic breath in color for the first time. And there were other cool moments like that when these monsters got to remind us how great they are, like when Kong burst out of the ocean, or when Godzilla suddenly popped his head out of a trap. And then there's the scene where a little boy goes to get some red berry juice and a giant octopus comes out of nowhere and attacks. Holy cow, did that freak me out. I am not a fan of cephalopods, large or small, and this one is super slick and sinister, hiding behind rocks waiting for its prey. And while it's not abnormal for giant animals or prehistoric beasts to show up alongside King Kong, this creep is the only one we see, and there's no indication given that there are other giant creatures around, so what's the deal with this? Anyway, icky and random as it was, this lengthy sequence will probably be one of the things I remember most about this movie. Oh yeah, and for this scene they used 3 real octopi and 1 fake one covered in plastic wrap for these close-ups. Legend has it that the special effects director ate one of the octopi after they were done filming. Anyway, seeing Godzilla and King Kong square off is definitely something special. Special enough that Hollywood is going to do it again in a couple of years. The big showdown starts off a little slow, but you don't have to wait too long before it turns into a big, angry, dirty fight, full of cheap shots, trash talk, and silly victory dances. Of particular humorous note are Godzilla's sassy arm flapping, and this thumping sound whenever they hit each other. There was a rumor going around for years that the 2 versions had different endings, one where Kong wins and one where Godzilla wins. But while I do think that's a fun idea, it's just a myth. At this point in the series, we're veering away from serious sci-fi horror, well, as serious as you can be when your monster is a guy in a rubber suit, and more toward amusing adventure comedy. Silly as this one can get, I know there are some later down the road that will be even wackier. Did I think King Kong vs. Godzilla was a masterpiece? No. But was it fun? Sure. And did it make me laugh sometimes? Absolutely. So those are my thoughts on this one. Let me know yours in the comments below, and I'll see you soon. Thanks for watching. Bye!